Have you ever noticed how the mind naturally drifts toward fear, toward worry, toward shame, toward worst-case scenarios? Even when life is calm, the mind keeps replaying old pain, old conversations, old failures. Why? Why do negative thoughts feel automatic? And why is it so difficult to escape them? The answer may lie in the way your brain is designed, because every repeated thought creates a pathway. And over time, the brain begins to favor familiar patterns, even unhealthy ones. But Scripture offers a completely different path, a path of renewal, a path of transformation, a path that begins in the mind. Your brain is constantly trying to become more efficient. It takes repeated behaviors and thoughts and turns them into automatic patterns. This is how habits form. The brain says, if we keep repeating this, it must be important. So it strengthens that pathway. This is called neuroplasticity. The brain physically adapts to repeated mental activity. Whatever you think repeatedly becomes easier to think again, including negative thoughts, fear, self-hatred, anxiety. The more those thoughts are repeated, the more natural they begin to feel, like walking the same trail through a forest. Eventually, the path becomes clear and automatic. And many people have unknowingly trained their minds to expect negativity, to scan for danger, to replay failure, to imagine rejection, not because they want to suffer, but because repetition built familiarity. And familiarity feels normal, even when it is unhealthy. Negative thoughts rarely stay isolated. They create loops. One fearful thought leads to another, then another, until your entire emotional state changes. A single thought can shape the direction of an entire day. This is why unchecked thinking is dangerous, because thoughts influence emotions. Emotions influence actions, and actions influence identity. Eventually, people begin saying things like, I'm just an anxious person. I'll never change. This is who I am. But many of those identities began as repeated thoughts. Thoughts rehearsed so often, they started feeling true. The brain does not always distinguish between truth and repetition. It responds to what is practiced. This is why constant exposure matters. What you consume daily is shaping you. Music shapes thought. Conversations shape thought. Social media shapes thought. Environment shapes thought. And eventually, your inner world begins reflecting what you repeatedly absorb. Long before neuroscience studied thought patterns, Scripture emphasized the importance of the mind. Philippians 4:8 says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is pure. Think about such things. Notice the instruction. Think. Because the battle is often mental before it becomes behavioral. Proverbs says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Romans 12:2 says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformation begins internally. God is not only concerned with actions, He is concerned with thought patterns. Because repeated thoughts eventually shape behavior. This is why Scripture repeatedly calls people to meditate on truth, not because repetition is meaningless ritual, but because repetition forms the mind. Every time you return your attention to truth instead of fear, you weaken one pathway and strengthen another. Renewal happens through repeated redirection. Changing your thought life can feel exhausting at first, because the brain prefers familiar routes, even unhealthy ones. This is why people often return to toxic thinking, destructive habits, fear patterns, self-sabotage. The old pathway's easier, more practiced, more automatic, but difficulty does not mean failure. It means new pathways are being built. Every time you interrupt a negative thought, you are training the brain. Every time you choose gratitude over bitterness, truth over fear, stillness over panic, you are reshaping mental patterns. Slowly, not instantly, but consistently. And consistency matters more than intensity. A renewed mind is not built in one emotional moment. It is built through daily repetition. So, if your mind keeps repeating negative thoughts, do not assume you are broken. You may simply be rehearsing pathways that were strengthened over time. And what was strengthened can also be weakened. The mind can change, not overnight, but gradually, one thought at a time, one prayer at a time, one act of renewal at a time. This is why guarding your mind matters, because whatever repeatedly enters your mind eventually shapes your inner world. So pay attention to what you feed your thoughts. Pay attention to what you meditate on. Pay attention to what you repeat, because your brain is always listening. And over time, your thoughts become pathways. If this video helped you, subscribe for more content exploring faith, neuroscience, mindset, and spiritual transformation. Because a renewed mind can change your entire life.